You won't believe what unfolds when Prince Harry sits down with Bill Maher and the gloves come off in ways nobody saw coming. This isn't just another celebrity interview gone wrong. This is a complete meltdown that had audiences gasping and producers scrambling. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds. Last night's episode of Real Time with Bill Maher was supposed to be a standard promotional appearance. Prince Harry was there to discuss his latest charitable initiatives and perhaps touch on his ongoing legal battles with the British press. The studio audience settled in, expecting the usual mix of Maher's irreverent humor and Harry's practiced media responses. But from the moment the Duke of Sussex walked onto that stage, something felt different. The energy was electric, charged with an undercurrent of tension that even the most seasoned talk show veterans could sense brewing beneath the surface. Maher opened with his trademark smirk, leaning back in his chair with that familiar gleam in his eye that regular viewers know means trouble is coming. "So, Harry," he began, his voice carrying that distinctive mix of curiosity and mischief, "you've been making quite a splash here in America. Left the royal family, got yourself a Netflix deal, moved to sunny California, living the American dream, right?" The question seemed innocent enough, but anyone familiar with Maher's style knew he was just warming up, testing the waters before diving into deeper, more turbulent territory. Prince Harry shifted slightly in his seat, his media training kicking in as he offered a diplomatic smile. "Well, Bill, it's been quite a journey. Meghan and I are grateful for the opportunities we've had here in the States. We're focused on our work with Archewell and making a positive impact." His response was measured, careful, exactly what you'd expect from someone who spent years navigating hostile interviews. But Maher wasn't satisfied with diplomatic answers, and the audience could sense he was just getting started. "Making a positive impact," Maher repeated, his eyebrows raising slightly. "That's interesting phrasing, because from where I sit, it seems like you've been making more of a different kind of impact. You know, the kind that involves airing your family's dirty laundry on every platform that'll have you." The studio fell silent for a moment, the weight of Maher's words hanging in the air like smoke. This wasn't the gentle ribbing that talk show guests usually endure. This was something sharper, more pointed. Harry's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but his media training held firm. "I think there's a difference between speaking your truth and airing dirty laundry, Bill. When institutions fail to protect the people they're supposed to serve, sometimes speaking out is the only option." His voice remained steady, but there was steel underneath the polished exterior. The audience could feel the temperature in the room beginning to rise, though neither man had crossed any obvious lines yet. Maher leaned forward, sensing an opening. "Speaking your truth. I love that phrase. Very California of you. But here's what I find fascinating about your truth, Harry. You left Britain because you wanted privacy, right? You wanted to get away from the media circus, protect your family. But then you do a tell-all interview with Oprah. You write a memoir spilling every royal secret you can remember. You do a Netflix documentary. That's not seeking privacy. That's the opposite of privacy. That's building a media empire on family drama." The words hit their target, and for the first time, Harry's composure cracked slightly. His hands, which had been resting calmly on the armrests of his chair, clenched slightly. "With respect, Bill, you're oversimplifying a very complex situation. When you're dealing with institutional racism, with a system that refuses to change, sometimes the only way to create accountability is through transparency." His voice had an edge now, the diplomatic mask beginning to slip. "Institutional racism." Maher nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "That's a serious accusation. And you know what? If that's really what happened, then absolutely, call it out. But here's my problem with your approach. You make these explosive claims. You drop these bombshells about conversations that may or may not have happened, and then you retreat to your Montecito mansion, while the rest of your family has to deal with the fallout. That doesn't seem like accountability to me. That seems like throwing grenades and running away." The studio audience was completely silent now, transfixed by the exchange unfolding before them. This had gone far beyond the usual celebrity interview territory. and into something much more volatile. Harry's face had darkened, his royal composure giving way to something rawer, more human. "You have no idea what my family has been through," he said, his voice low but carrying clearly through the hushed studio. "You have no idea what it's like to watch your wife be torn apart by a media that has learned nothing from what happened to my mother." Maher didn't back down. If anything, Harry's emotional response seemed to energize him. "Your mother and I have nothing but respect for Princess Diana's memory. But your mother knew how to work with the media when it served her purposes. She understood the game. You seem to want all the benefits of royal status. The platform, the influence, the multi-million-dollar deals, without any of the responsibilities or scrutiny that comes with it. You can't have it both ways." That last comment hit Harry like a physical blow. His carefully maintained composure finally began to crumble as decades of frustration and grief bubbled to the surface. "How dare you?" he said, his voice rising for the first time. "How dare you use my mother's memory to justify your simplistic take on a situation you clearly don't understand? You sit here in your studio, making jokes about things that destroyed my family, and you think you have the right to lecture me about responsibility." The tension in the room was now palpable, electric. Audience members were looking at each other with wide eyes, uncertain whether they were witnessing great television or about to see something much uglier unfold. Maher, for his part, seemed completely unfazed by Harry's emotional outburst. If anything, he appeared to be enjoying it, like a predator that had finally drawn blood from its prey. "I think I hit a nerve there," Maher said with that signature smirk, his tone almost conversational despite the fire in Harry's eyes. "And you know what? Good. Maybe it's time someone asked you these questions without kissing your royal ring first. Because here's the thing, Harry. Americans don't do deference. We threw off the monarchy for a reason. And when someone comes here claiming to be fighting for justice while simultaneously cashing in on family trauma, we notice." Harry was on the edge of his seat now, his hands gripping the armrest so tightly his knuckles had gone white. The transformation from polished royal to barely controlled fury was complete, and everyone in the studio could sense that something major was about to happen. But just as Harry opened his mouth to respond, Maher held up a hand, his eyes gleaming with anticipation of what was coming next. "Before you say something you might regret on national television," Maher continued, his voice dripping with mock concern, "let me ask you this, and I want you to really think about your answer here, Harry. When you decided to tell the world that someone in your family had concerns about your son's skin color, did you consider for even 1 second what that would do to your grandmother? A woman who spent 70 years trying to modernize an ancient institution, who worked tirelessly to bring the monarchy into the 21st century. Or were you so caught up in your own victimhood that you just didn't care?" The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Harry's face went through a series of emotions: shock, anger, and something that looked almost like shame, before hardening into cold fury. The audience held its collective breath, sensing they were witnessing something unprecedented. This wasn't just celebrity gossip anymore. This was a full-scale character assassination happening in real time. "Don't you dare," Harry said, his voice barely above a whisper, but carrying the full weight of royal authority that centuries of breeding had instilled in him. "Don't you dare question my love for my grandmother. Everything I did, every decision I made, was to protect my family. Something the institution I was raised in never bothered to do for me or my wife." His accent had become more pronounced, the carefully cultivated transatlantic tone giving way to something distinctly British and aristocratic. Maher wasn't backing down. If anything, Harry's emotional response seemed to fuel his fire. "Protect your family? Harry, you threw your family under the bus on international television. You accused them of racism without naming names, which is actually worse because it lets people's imaginations run wild. You could have handled this privately. You could have worked within the system. Instead, you chose to go nuclear. And now you want to play the victim when people call you out on it? The system doesn't work," Harry exploded, finally losing the last vestiges of his composure. He was fully standing now, pointing an accusing finger at Maher. "The system killed my mother. The system drove my wife to the brink of suicide. The system protects pedophiles and covers up scandals while crucifying anyone who dares to speak truth to power. His voice cracked with emotion, years of suppressed rage finally pouring out in front of millions of viewers. The studio erupted in shocked murmurs. This was no longer a talk show interview. This was a public breakdown, a royal meltdown of epic proportions. Camera zoomed in on Harry's face, capturing every flicker of pain and anger that crossed his features. In the control room, producers were frantically deciding whether to cut to commercial or let this train wreck continue to unfold. Maher sat back in his chair, a satisfied smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He had gotten exactly what he wanted. The real Harry, not the media-trained version. "Now we're getting somewhere," he said calmly, his voice a stark contrast to Harry's emotional outburst. "This is the passion you should have had when you were working within the system instead of running away from it. But here's what I don't understand. If the system is so broken, if it's so corrupt and racist and dangerous, why didn't you stay and fight? Why didn't you use your position, your privilege, your platform to change it from the inside?" Harry was pacing now, unable to remain seated, his royal training completely abandoned. "Because they would have destroyed us, just like they destroyed my mother. You think I could have protected Meghan and my children by staying in that gilded cage? By playing their games and following their rules while they fed us to the wolves?" He turned to face the audience, his voice rising to address them directly. "You have no idea what it's like to live in that fishbowl, to have every moment of your life scrutinized, to watch the woman you love being torn apart by people who don't even know her." "But you're still in that fishbowl, Harry," Maher shot back, his voice cutting through Harry's emotional plea like a knife. "You just traded one fishbowl for another. Now, instead of serving the crown, you're serving Netflix and Spotify and whatever media company will pay you the most for your next tell-all special. At least when you were a working royal, you were serving something bigger than yourself. Now you're just serving your own bank account." The accusation hit Harry like a physical blow. For a moment he stood frozen, his mouth open as if searching for words that wouldn't come. The audience could see the exact moment when Maher's words penetrated his defenses, when the carefully constructed narrative he had built around his departure from royal life began to crumble. His face cycled through emotions, denial, anger, and finally, a kind of desperate fury that made everyone in the studio uncomfortable. "How dare you question my motives?" Harry said, his voice now dangerously quiet. "How dare you sit there in your comfortable little bubble and judge decisions you could never understand? You want to know why I left? Because I watched my wife almost die rather than ask for help because she knew what would happen if she did. Because I watched my brother, my own flesh and blood, choose the institution over family. Because I realized that everything I was taught about duty and service was just a lie to keep us in line while they profited off our pain." Maher leaned forward, sensing he had pushed Harry to the breaking point. "And there it is," he said with a triumphant smile. "There's the real reason you left. Not because of racism, not because of media intrusion, not because you wanted privacy. You left because you couldn't handle the fact that the institution was bigger than you. That duty came before personal feelings. That being royal means sacrifice, not just privilege. You wanted all the perks of being a prince without any of the responsibilities. And when you couldn't have that, you took your ball and went home." The silence that followed was deafening. Harry stood there, trembling with rage, his chest heaving as if he had just run a marathon. The camera captured every detail, the sweat beading on his forehead, the way his hands shook with barely contained fury, the wild look in his eyes that suggested he was capable of anything in that moment. The audience sat in stunned silence, unsure whether they were witnessing the greatest television moment of the year or about to see something much darker unfold. "You know what, Bill?" Harry said finally, his voice eerily calm after his emotional outburst. "You're right about one thing. I did choose family over institution. I chose love over duty. I chose protecting the people I care about over maintaining a system that was slowly killing us all. And if that makes me selfish in your eyes, if that makes me weak, then I'll wear that label proudly. Because at least I can look at myself in the mirror every morning, knowing I didn't sacrifice my family on the altar of tradition and public opinion. But Maher wasn't finished. He sensed that Harry was trying to regain control of the narrative, trying to turn his breakdown into some kind of noble stand, and he wasn't about to let that happen. That's a beautiful speech, Harry. Really touching. But let's talk about what you actually sacrificed your family for. Because it wasn't privacy, you've been more public since leaving than you ever were as a working royal. It wasn't service. You've abandoned all your military charities and patronages. It wasn't even safety. You're still followed by paparazzi, still in the headlines every day. So what exactly did you gain by burning down everything your grandmother spent her life building? The question hung in the air like a death sentence. Harry's face went through a series of micro-expressions: confusion, realization, and then pure, undiluted rage. For a moment, the studio was so quiet you could hear the cameras whirring as they captured every nuance of what was about to unfold. The audience sat frozen, sensing they were about to witness something that would be replayed and analyzed for years to come. "What did I gain?" Harry repeated slowly, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than his earlier shouting. "What did I gain, Bill? I gained my sanity. I gained my wife's life. I gained the chance to raise my children without them having to carry the weight of an institution that sees them as nothing more than props in a centuries-old performance." His voice began to rise again, each word delivered with surgical precision. "And yes, I gained the freedom to call out people like you, who think they understand situations they've never lived through, who think they can sit in judgment of choices they've never had to make." Maher's smirk widened. He had Harry exactly where he wanted him: emotional, defensive, and making statements that would haunt him long after the cameras stopped rolling. Freedom to call people out? Is that what this is? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks more like a temper tantrum from someone who couldn't handle being told no for the first time in his privileged life. You talk about your children like they're better off growing up without knowing their extended family, without understanding their heritage, without the support system that every royal child has relied on for generations. That's not protection, Harry. That's isolation. "Don't you dare lecture me about my children," Harry exploded, his voice cracking with fury. "Don't you dare pretend to know what's best for them when you've never had to worry about whether your child would be safe walking down the street because of who their parents are. You've never had to explain to a 3-year-old why there are photographers following them to the playground. You've never had to watch your wife cry herself to sleep because the press is calling her names that I won't repeat on television." The emotion in Harry's voice was raw, desperate, and it seemed to energize Maher even more. "You're right. I haven't experienced those things. But you know who has? Every other member of your family. Your brother dealt with the same pressures and stayed. Your cousins deal with it and stay. Your father dealt with it for decades and stayed. The difference is, they understood that being royal means accepting certain sacrifices for the greater good. You just wanted the crown without the thorns." "The greater good?" Harry's laugh was bitter, almost hysterical. "You mean the greater good of covering up scandals? The greater good of protecting predators? The greater good of maintaining a system that destroys anyone who doesn't fit the perfect mold they've created?" He was gesticulating wildly now, his composure completely shattered. "I've seen what your greater good does to people, Bill. I buried my mother because of your greater good. I almost lost my wife because of your greater good. So forgive me if I'm not willing to sacrifice my family on that particular altar." Maher leaned back in his chair, his expression shifting from amusement to something colder, more calculating. "And there it is again. Your mother. You keep coming back to that, don't you? Using her memory to justify every decision you make, every bridge you burn, every relationship you destroy. But here's what I think really happened, Harry. I think you realized you'd never be king. You'd never be the star of the show, and you couldn't handle living in your brother's shadow. So you found a way to make it all about you. The grieving son, the protective husband, the crusading prince fighting against an evil system. It's brilliant, really. You've managed to make yourself the victim and the hero of your own story." The accusation hit Harry like a physical blow. His face went white, then red, cycling through emotions so quickly the cameras could barely keep up. "How dare you?" he whispered, his voice shaking with rage. "How dare you reduce everything I've been through, everything my family has suffered, to some petty jealousy about succession? You know nothing about what it's like to lose a parent in front of the whole world, to have your grief dissected and analyzed and judged by people like you who think it's all just entertainment." "But that's exactly what you've turned it into, isn't it?" Maher shot back mercilessly. "Entertainment. Content for your Netflix shows, material for your book deals, talking points for your interviews. You've monetized your trauma, Harry. You've turned your family's pain into a business model. And the tragic thing is, I don't think you even realize you're doing it." That was the final straw. Harry stood up so violently that his chair toppled backward, clattering to the floor with a crash that echoed through the stunned studio. "That's enough!" he roared, his voice breaking with fury and something that sounded dangerously close to desperation. "I will not sit here and listen to you trivialize my mother's death, my wife's suffering, my children's future, for the sake of your pathetic little comedy show." The audience gasped collectively as Harry began ripping off his microphone, his hands shaking so badly he could barely manage the simple task. "You want to know what I gained, Bill? I gained the knowledge that there are people in this world who will say anything, who will attack anyone, who will cross any line for ratings. People like you who hide behind comedy and claim it's just entertainment while you destroy lives for sport." Maher watched with obvious satisfaction as Harry struggled with his microphone pack, making no move to help or de-escalate. "Running away again, Harry? That seems to be your solution to everything. When things get uncomfortable, when people ask hard questions, when reality doesn't match the narrative you've created, just run. Just like you ran from your royal duties. Just like you ran from your country. Just like you're running now." Harry froze in the middle of removing his microphone, Maher's words hitting him like ice water. For a moment, something flickered across his face. Doubt, shame, recognition. But it was quickly replaced by cold fury. "You know what the difference is between you and me, Bill? When I run, I'm running towards something better. When I left the royal family, I was running toward a life where I could actually make a difference instead of just cutting ribbons and smiling for photos. When I came to America, I was running toward freedom and opportunity and the chance to build something meaningful." He finally freed himself from the microphone and threw it onto his chair with disgust. "But you're not running toward anything. You're just standing still, making jokes about other people's pain because you're too cowardly to examine your own life, too scared to take any real risks, too small to build anything lasting. At least when I burn bridges, I'm building new ones. All you do is tear things down." With that, Harry turned toward the exit, but Maher wasn't done with him yet. "That's right, Harry. Walk away. Show America what we can expect from British royalty when things get tough. I'm sure your grandmother would be so proud to see how you handle adversity." The words were designed to cut deep, and they found their mark. Harry stopped dead in his tracks, his shoulders tensing. For a terrifying moment, it looked like he might turn around and physically confront Maher. The studio held its collective breath, security personnel subtly moving closer to the stage. But instead, Harry spoke without turning around, his voice carrying clearly through the silent studio. "My grandmother understood something you never will, Bill. She understood that true strength isn't about tearing others down to build yourself up. It's about knowing when to walk away from people who will never understand what you're fighting for." He paused, his voice softening just slightly. "She also understood that sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is disappoint people who were never really on your side to begin with." And with that, Prince Harry walked off the set of Real Time with Bill Maher, leaving behind a stunned audience, a satisfied host, and what would undoubtedly become one of the most talked-about television moments of the year. The camera captured his retreating figure until he disappeared into the wings, while Maher sat back in his chair with a triumphant smile, already crafting the jokes he would make about this moment for weeks to come. The studio remained silent for several long seconds after Harry's exit, the weight of what they had just witnessed settling over everyone present. This wasn't just a celebrity walkout. It was the complete public breakdown of a relationship between the royal family and American media. broadcast live for millions to see. As the cameras finally cut to commercial, one thing was clear. This confrontation would be dissected, analyzed, and debated for years to come, cementing its place as one of the most explosive talk show moments in television history.